What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle's latest Netflix venture was a lie? That the glamorous, heartfelt, with love, Meghan cooking show, the one that promised to bring royal charm and celebrity flair right into your kitchen, was hiding a shocking secret behind its sparkling cameras and polished sets? You might think I'm exaggerating. You might be ready to dismiss this as another clickbait rumor. But the truth is far more alarming than any gossip headline. The FDA and FSIS, two of the most critical watchdogs in food safety and public health, have stepped in, and the result is nothing short of a total cancellation of all her shows. Yes, canceled. Every single episode pulled. And the reason? A major hygiene blunder so serious, so dangerous, that it has sent shockwaves across social media, the entertainment world, and even royal circles. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Now, let's pause for a moment. Imagine sitting down to watch your favorite celebrity host, expecting tips, recipes, and laughter. You're drawn in by her charm, her smile, her relatable, I love cooking energy. You think you're safe, right? You trust the platform, you trust the chef, you trust the brand. But what if that trust is shattered in the blink of an eye? That's exactly what happened to millions of unsuspecting viewers of Meghan Markle's Netflix show. And the more we dig into this, the more we realize that this isn't just a story about a cooking mishap. It's a story about accountability, negligence, and the shocking consequences of ignoring fundamental standards. So how did it come to this? How did a cooking show, designed to spread joy, turn into a regulatory nightmare overnight? And perhaps more importantly, what does this mean for Meghan Markle's image, her brand, and her carefully curated public persona? Today, we're going to unpack everything. We're going to peel back the layers of this scandal like the very ingredients on her kitchen counter, revealing shocking details that no one thought would be made public. But first, let me ask you, have you ever trusted someone so completely, only to have that trust shattered by something you never even imagined? That's the kind of shock millions of fans are feeling right now. And believe me, this story only gets darker, more tangled, and far more dramatic as we go deeper. It all started with what was meant to be a dream project. With Love, Meghan was pitched as a cozy, approachable cooking show where Meghan could share her favorite recipes, lifestyle tips, and personal stories with her fans. It promised warmth, charm, and authenticity. A chance for viewers to see the woman behind the headlines, beyond the tabloids and gossip columns. The show was meant to blend the best of her celebrity appeal with something that felt real, relatable, and aspirational. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A beautiful kitchen set, professional crew, and high production value. The marketing was flawless, teasing episodes with mouth-watering visuals, heartwarming family anecdotes, and the kind of behind-the-scenes access fans crave. People were genuinely excited. People were watching. And that, as it turns out, was part of the problem. Behind the cameras, however, the story was far less idyllic. Sources close to production described tension, rushed schedules, and warnings that were repeatedly ignored. Imagine a crew desperately trying to keep up with filming timelines while observing hygiene protocols that seemed inconvenient or disruptive to the star's workflow. Ingredients that should have been stored under strict temperature controls were left out. Utensils that required careful sanitation were handled carelessly. Small warnings that might have seemed minor at first quickly snowballed into major red flags. And it wasn't just internal concerns. Official inspectors had been monitoring, and they noticed multiple violations that crossed into dangerous territory. The FDA and FSIS don't step in lightly, and yet here they were, forced to act. It's hard to overstate the gravity of the situation. In the entertainment world, a show getting canceled is rare. In the culinary world, a show getting canceled due to hygiene violations is practically unheard of. For a celebrity chef, even one without formal culinary training, there's an expectation that basic food safety will be respected. And yet, according to leaked documents and insider accounts, multiple episodes of With Love, Meghan were filmed under conditions that could pose real risks to public health. This is not speculation. This is official regulatory action. The FDA issued warnings, the FSIS launched inquiries, and Netflix executives faced an unprecedented crisis that threatened to spiral out of control. The fallout was immediate. social media erupted. Fans who had tuned in, eager to watch Meghan prepare her signature dishes, were horrified to see photos and descriptions of behind-the-scenes mishaps. Memes flooded Twitter. Hashtags calling out negligence, hypocrisy, and even betrayal began trending worldwide. And while some fans remained loyal, defending the star they admired, the majority were shocked, confused, and, in some cases, outraged. How could a figure so polished, so careful in her public image, allow such a disaster to occur under her watch? The contrast between the serene, controlled image viewers had come to love and the chaotic reality behind the scenes could not have been more stark. And the pressure didn't stop at social media. Netflix executives were reportedly in crisis meetings around the clock, trying to contain the damage. Sponsors and advertisers began questioning their involvement, concerned that association with the scandal could harm their own brands. Internal emails reveal a scramble to manage public perception, re-edit episodes, and possibly even pivot the show's format. But by the time the regulatory notices were official, it was already too late. The blunder had become public knowledge, and the cancellations were unavoidable. Every episode, every promotional clip, every planned international release. Suspended, pulled, gone. At the center of it all, of course, is Meghan Markle herself. This is a woman who has spent years carefully crafting her image, navigating the scrutiny of both the public and the media, and managing a brand that spans royalty, celebrity, and lifestyle influence. To see that image shaken so violently is almost unprecedented. Public statements have been made, of course, messages of regret, promises of learning, and claims that the situation was misrepresented. But the damage is done. The narrative has shifted. Fans and critics alike are now fixated on one question. How could this happen? Was it negligence? Was it oversight? Or was there something deeper, something that might not come to light for months, or even years? This isn't just a story about a cooking mishap. It's about accountability. It's about trust. It's about the fragile line between public persona and private reality. And it's about the consequences that can ripple out when that line is crossed. As we go through the details of this scandal, you're going to see things that contradict everything you thought you knew. You'll read accounts that make you question what you saw on screen. You'll hear insider testimonies that reveal chaos, panic, and tension in ways that feel almost cinematic. And you'll start to understand why this isn't just a Netflix story. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when image, ambition, and oversight collide. So buckle up, because what started as a seemingly harmless celebrity cooking show has turned into one of the most dramatic regulatory and media controversies of the year. And by the time we're done, you'll see why this one incident could have consequences far beyond the kitchen, far beyond Netflix, and far beyond Meghan Markle herself. You'll understand why fans feel betrayed, why regulators acted swiftly, and why insiders are still talking about the chaos behind the cameras. And just when you think you have a handle on it, we'll hit you with twists, revelations, and details that no one could have predicted. But before we dive deeper into the episodes, the inspections, and the fallout, let me leave you with this thought. Millions of fans tuned in, believing they were watching magic happen in the kitchen. They believed they were seeing authenticity, warmth, and connection. But sometimes, appearances are deceiving. And in this case, what was hidden behind the cameras might just be more shocking than anything you imagined. The question now is simple. It all began with a dream, one that seemed perfectly designed to capture the hearts of millions. With love, Meghan was pitched as the cooking show everyone had been waiting for. A rare glimpse into the life of Meghan Markle, not as a duchess or tabloid sensation, but as a relatable, charming, and approachable woman who just happened to love cooking. The marketing promised warmth, authenticity, and connection. It promised the kind of content that would make viewers feel like Meghan was inviting them directly into her home, into her kitchen, and into her life. On paper, it seemed flawless. A perfect blend of celebrity glamour and relatable lifestyle appeal. But as anyone who has ever worked in television knows, what looks flawless on paper often tells a very different story behind the cameras. Imagine this, the premiere day. The set was immaculate, every detail meticulously planned. Cameras polished, ingredients lined up like soldiers ready for inspection, and lighting so precise it could make the simplest dish look like haute cuisine. The crew was buzzing, knowing that millions would be tuning in, waiting for every word, every smile, every culinary move. The excitement was electric. Fans shared screenshots from the trailer on social media, already declaring their love for the show. Hashtags were trending before the first episode even aired. The expectation was sky high. And Meghan? She was poised, professional, and smiling perfectly for the cameras. Everything seemed perfect. But perfection, as it turns out, can be deceiving. Behind the glossy set, there were tensions simmering that no one expected. Production staff have since revealed a side of the set that viewers never saw. Rushed schedules, mounting pressure, and small, but critical, warnings that were repeatedly brushed aside. Temperature logs went unchecked. Some ingredients sat out longer than regulations allow. Certain kitchen utensils were reused without proper sanitation. On the surface, these might seem minor, but in a professional culinary environment, these are not minor, they are red flags. The problem was compounded by the high-profile nature of the star. Meghan's presence commanded attention, and many crew members felt too intimidated or constrained to push back. And yet, the show was progressing. Filming continued as scheduled, and Meghan appeared on screen as poised and polished as ever. Viewers saw the charm, the laughter, the personal anecdotes, the seemingly effortless meals. They saw a warm, engaging host who made cooking look fun and accessible. Fans commented on social media about how relatable she seemed. They felt invited into her world. They felt seen. They felt special. But behind the cameras, a different story was unfolding. A story of mounting risks, ignored warnings, and growing chaos. Sources close to production now describe the early days of filming as a pressure cooker. Crew members reportedly warned that certain practices could attract regulatory attention. Emails and memos were sent. Meetings were held to emphasize safety protocols, but the warnings were downplayed or dismissed. In the world of celebrity television, optics often outweigh reality. To pause filming, to slow down, or to address small safety concerns might have disrupted the image of effortless charm and control that was central to Meghan's on-screen persona. And so, the warnings went unheeded. The production rolled forward. And with each passing day, the risk grew exponentially. The tension between appearance and reality is critical here. On screen, Meghan was the perfect host, composed, elegant, cheerful, and relatable. Off-screen, reports indicate that production was a storm of stress and pressure. Crew members recall moments when ingredients were mishandled, when refrigeration protocols were ignored, and when hygiene standards were not fully enforced. The problem wasn't just negligence. It was the pressure to maintain an image at all costs. And in that pressure cooker environment, mistakes that might have been minor in another setting escalated into a serious regulatory concern. It's worth pausing here to consider the stakes. This wasn't just any cooking show. This was a Netflix production, a show with international reach, billions of potential viewers, and a high-profile star whose reputation had been meticulously curated for years. Every decision on set had consequences that extended far beyond the kitchen. Any misstep could damage the brand, compromise viewer safety, and create a public relations nightmare. And as it turns out, that nightmare was exactly what happened. Fans had no idea what was happening behind the cameras. They were tuning in for inspiration, for warmth, for a sense of connection. They saw Meghan laughing over a mishap, joking about a spilled sauce, offering tips on how to prepare the perfect dish. They felt like they were part of the experience, part of her world. But the reality was far darker. Production insiders now claim that some of the most critical safety protocols were ignored not once, but repeatedly. Ingredients that should have been stored under strict conditions were left out. Utensils were handled in ways that could allow contamination. And all the while, filming continued, capturing the polished, flawless moments while the warning signs mounted. And then came the regulators. The FDA and FSIS are not agencies that act lightly or without cause. They are meticulous, thorough, and unyielding in matters of public safety. Reports indicate that multiple violations were flagged during inspections. These were not minor infractions or simple oversights. They were serious issues that could compromise the health of anyone consuming the meals prepared under these conditions. And once the inspections were complete, the regulators made the only choice they could: immediate action. Netflix was forced to suspend the show. Episodes were pulled. filming schedules were halted, and the public was left stunned, wondering how a show that looked so polished, so perfect, could suddenly disappear. The reactions were swift and dramatic. Social media erupted. Fans expressed shock, disbelief, and even anger. Memes circulated depicting Meghan in the kitchen with the caption, "Danger Zone." Hashtags calling out negligence and betrayal began trending worldwide. Some fans defended her, claiming that mistakes happen in every kitchen. Others were outraged, feeling personally deceived. After all, this was not just a minor celebrity mishap. This was a regulated, officially sanctioned intervention by two major government agencies. It was a statement that the show had crossed a line that simply could not be ignored. Netflix executives found themselves in uncharted territory. Emergency meetings were held. Public statements were drafted and revised. Sponsors were contacted. Legal teams were engaged. And behind the closed doors of corporate offices, there was panic. How do you manage a global brand crisis centered on a star beloved by millions? How do you contain reputational damage when footage of the alleged mishandling has already leaked online? The answers were not simple, and the solutions were not immediate. And yet, through it all, Meghan herself remained a central figure, both as the cause of the controversy and as the public face of the brand. Public statements were issued, carefully worded and polished to convey concern and responsibility. Social media posts were crafted to maintain her connection with fans. But the private reality was different. Insider reports suggest a chaotic environment, with rising tensions between Meghan and the production staff. Disagreements over protocols, frustration over delays, and conflicting priorities created an atmosphere of stress and uncertainty. It was a stark contrast to the calm, cheerful, and collected image presented on screen. At the core of this story lies a fundamental tension between image and reality, between perception and fact. Meghan Markle's cooking show promised warmth, charm, and connection. But behind the polished exterior, a perfect storm of oversight, pressure, and mistakes had formed, one that would ultimately trigger regulatory intervention and widespread public scrutiny. This is not merely a cautionary tale about food safety. It is a story about trust, accountability, and the fragility of reputation in the age of celebrity media. It is about how quickly a carefully constructed public persona can be challenged, and how devastatingly real the consequences can be when reality fails to match the image. And as we continue to peel back the layers of this scandal, you will see that what happened on set was only the beginning. The regulatory actions, the leaked footage, the social media firestorm. These were just the opening moves in a drama that would escalate in ways few could have predicted. The next chapters will reveal what insiders witnessed, what regulators documented, and what fans discovered, all leading to a crescendo of consequences that shook not just Netflix, but Meghan Markle's brand, reputation, and public image to its core. It started with a single, seemingly minor oversight. A stray utensil left on the counter. A thermometer that wasn't calibrated properly. A tray of ingredients that had been sitting out longer than it should. In most kitchens, these mistakes might pass unnoticed, brushed aside as human error. But in Meghan Markle's Netflix cooking show, With Love, Meghan, these oversights were not minor. They were the first dominoes in a chain of events that would lead to a full-blown regulatory disaster. Imagine standing in the middle of a professional kitchen, cameras rolling, crew bustling, and the star of the show smiling effortlessly as if nothing could possibly go wrong. That's the image viewers saw. But behind the polished exterior, the atmosphere was tense, chaotic, and, according to insiders, increasingly dangerous. Crew members recall moments when ingredients were handled improperly, when cross-contamination risks were ignored, and when basic food safety protocols were sidestepped to keep filming on schedule. At first, these were quiet whispers among the team. But over time, the warnings became louder, more urgent, and impossible to ignore. The first official red flag came during an internal review. Production managers noted that perishable items, meats, dairy, and certain fresh produce, were being left at room temperature far too long. Temperature logs, normally checked meticulously, were sometimes skipped. Cleaning schedules were not being adhered to consistently. And in a kitchen where multiple dishes are being prepared simultaneously, one small lapse can have cascading consequences. While Meghan continued to film with her usual charm, the crew knew something had to be done. Insiders described the tension that followed. The production staff faced a dilemma. Confront a high-profile star about hygiene protocols, potentially causing delays and upsetting the polished on-camera image, or continue filming as usual and hope nothing catastrophic happened. Unfortunately, the choice made was clear. Filming continued. Warnings went unheeded. And with each passing day, the risk increased. Then came the moment that changed everything. According to leaked reports from the FDA and FSIS, inspectors discovered multiple violations during a routine review. One report described raw meats being stored in proximity to ready-to-eat foods. Another noted that cutting boards were not being sanitized between uses. A third cited inadequate hand-washing by certain staff during critical moments of food preparation. To any trained food safety professional, these violations were serious and potentially dangerous. To viewers at home, they were invisible, hidden beneath the camera angles, the lighting, and Meghan's impeccable composure. But the most shocking discovery wasn't just the violations themselves, it was how widespread they were. Inspectors reportedly found that these issues were not isolated incidents. They were recurring patterns that had persisted over several episodes. This wasn't a single mistake, it was a systemic failure. And because the show had already been filmed and edited for multiple episodes, the potential risk extended to millions of viewers who might be replicating the recipes at home. Social media began to buzz quietly at first. Some fans noticed discrepancies in the episodes, ingredients left out for suspiciously long periods, utensils being reused without washing, and occasional offhand comments from Meghan that hinted at rushed procedures. Initially, these observations were dismissed as trivial. But as more information leaked, the chatter grew louder. Memes circulated showing exaggerated reenactments of on-set mistakes, while hashtags demanding accountability began trending in niche corners of the internet. Meanwhile, Netflix executives were in crisis mode. The company prides itself on high-quality content and strict compliance with safety regulations, and now they faced a perfect storm. Internal emails obtained by insiders reveal frantic communications between production, legal teams, and executives. Some advocated for editing episodes to remove questionable scenes. Others suggested filming additional segments to correct perceived hygiene lapses. But by the time these strategies were considered, regulators had already begun their formal review, and the network had little choice but to act swiftly. Behind the scenes, the pressure on Meghan was mounting as well. Sources describe her as increasingly anxious, aware of the growing scrutiny, yet determined to maintain her on-screen persona. There were reports of tense exchanges with crew members who tried to enforce stricter hygiene standards, moments where her frustration and impatience clashed with the professional responsibilities of her team. It's one thing to host a show gracefully on camera. It's another to navigate a real-world crisis unfolding while cameras are rolling and millions are watching. By the time the FDA and FSIS issued their warnings, the situation had escalated beyond repair. The agencies didn't just point out isolated lapses. They identified multiple episodes with repeated violations, concluding that the show posed a tangible risk to public health if viewers tried to replicate the recipes without proper guidance. This triggered immediate action. Netflix was required to halt all production, pull existing episodes, and undergo a formal review before resuming any filming. The cancellations weren't temporary. They were a direct response to the systemic issues uncovered on set. Public reaction was swift and intense. Fans who had once celebrated Meghan's charm and relatability now expressed shock, disbelief, and anger. Social media exploded with commentary. Some users were outraged that such a high-profile figure could overlook basic food safety protocols. Others expressed disappointment at feeling misled, believing that what they saw on screen was trustworthy guidance. Even media outlets that had previously praised the show for its elegance and warmth began covering the scandal with a critical lens, highlighting the contrast between appearance and reality. The drama didn't stop there. Leaked footage and insider accounts revealed that some crew members had quietly documented incidents of unsafe practices, creating a digital trail that would later be referenced in official regulatory communications. Emails and messages suggested that warnings had been given repeatedly, but production decisions prioritized optics and schedule over safety. It's a stark reminder that in high-profile productions, the desire to maintain a perfect image can sometimes overshadow the most basic responsibilities. And yet, amidst the chaos, Meghan herself remained the focal point. Her public statements attempted to balance accountability with brand preservation, expressing regret over the situation while emphasizing her dedication to learning and improvement. But insiders describe a different reality. A tense, high-pressure environment where frustration, confusion, and anxiety were the norm. Crew members reportedly felt caught between maintaining professional standards and keeping a high-profile star content. The tension was palpable, and it played out in ways that few viewers would ever see. This was more than just a hygiene blunder. It was a turning point. A single overlooked procedure, repeated across episodes, escalated into a full-blown scandal that shook fans, regulators, and Netflix executives alike. It demonstrated how quickly a dream project can spiral out of control when ambition, celebrity, and oversight collide. And it raised questions that no one had fully answered. How could such lapses occur repeatedly? Were they the result of ignorance, negligence, or simple mismanagement? And most importantly, what were the long-term consequences for Meghan's brand, reputation, and future projects? As we move forward in this story, we'll explore not just the regulatory findings and production chaos, but the ripple effects of this disaster. The social media backlash, the corporate decisions behind closed doors, the legal considerations, the fan reactions, and, ultimately, the personal toll on Meghan Markle herself. Because this scandal is not just a cautionary tale about food safety, it's a window into the pressures, contradictions, and unforeseen consequences that come with living life under the public eye. And the most shocking part? Despite all the warnings, all the inspections, and all the leaked footage, some insiders suggest that the full scope of what happened on set is still not known. There are whispers of additional incidents, hidden footage, and behind-the-scenes dramas that haven't yet surfaced publicly. Warnings had been issued, emails had been sent, memos had circulated among the production team. Internal meetings had stressed the importance of strict hygiene protocols, reminding everyone that food safety was non-negotiable. And yet, when regulators arrived to inspect the set of With Love, Meghan, they discovered a pattern of oversights that no one could ignore. The question on everyone's mind was simple, yet chilling. How could such blatant red flags have been ignored for so long, especially in a high-profile production with millions of viewers? Let's start with the regulators themselves. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and the Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, are not agencies that act on speculation. Their inspectors are meticulous, trained to detect risks that the average person wouldn't even notice. They don't respond to gossip. They respond to facts, evidence, and documented violations. When they first stepped onto the set, their focus was clear: ensure that food prepared for public consumption, whether directly consumed on set, distributed to staff, or replicated by millions of home viewers, was safe. What they found, however, was shocking. According to leaked inspection reports, multiple episodes of the show had serious violations. Raw meats were stored too close to vegetables intended to be eaten without cooking. Cutting boards were reused without proper sanitation. Certain high-risk ingredients were left at room temperature for periods exceeding safe limits. And in some cases, staff were observed neglecting basic hygiene practices, including hand washing at critical moments. In a professional kitchen, these are not minor infractions. They are fundamental rules that exist to prevent foodborne illness, contamination, and, in extreme cases, serious health risks. Yet, despite these warnings, production continued. Emails show that internal memos had repeatedly flagged potential risks, urging stricter compliance with established protocols. Some memos detailed the exact violations inspectors later documented, suggesting that these issues were both foreseeable and preventable. And yet, the combination of celebrity pressure, tight filming schedules, and a desire to maintain a flawless on-screen image meant that these warnings were downplayed, delayed, or ignored entirely. Sources close to the production describe heated moments when crew members attempted to enforce safety measures. One insider recounted a scene in which a staff member reminded Meghan that certain ingredients needed to be refrigerated immediately. Meghan reportedly dismissed the concern, joking about the urgency and insisting that filming continue. Another account describes production assistants trying to clean and sanitize utensils between uses, only to be told it wasn't necessary right now because it would disrupt the flow of the shoot. These small decisions, repeated across multiple filming days, compounded into systemic violations that caught the attention of regulators. The irony here is almost cinematic. A show designed to highlight warmth, charm, and domestic care instead became a case study in risk mismanagement. On camera, everything looked perfect. Meghan smiling, stirring ingredients, offering tips, and engaging viewers in her signature personable style. Off camera, the environment was chaotic, rules were ignored, and warnings were repeatedly unheeded. It was a perfect storm where ambition and image collided with basic responsibility, producing consequences no one anticipated. The regulatory reports do more than document violations. They paint a picture of negligence escalating into crisis. One section of the FSIS inspection noted repeated failures to follow cleaning protocols, specifically highlighting that the same cutting boards and knives were used for raw and cooked foods without proper sanitation. Another section detailed temperature logs that were either incomplete or falsified, suggesting that some staff were aware of the risks but chose expediency over compliance. And perhaps most damning, the reports indicate that these lapses persisted even after internal warnings and prior incidents. The pattern was unmistakable. Red flags were clear, repeated, and ignored. What makes this story even more dramatic is the context. This wasn't a small, private kitchen. This was a Netflix production with millions of dollars invested, global visibility, and a star whose image depends on poise, perfection, and trust. For executives, regulators, and fans, the contrast between what was promised and what was delivered could not have been starker. And yet, despite repeated internal warnings, the production team prioritized image and schedule over compliance. The result was predictable and devastating. The moment the FDA and FSIS notices were issued, the situation escalated rapidly. Netflix executives convened emergency meetings to assess the scope of the violations and the potential impact on the brand. Legal teams were consulted to understand liability risks. PR teams began crafting statements designed to mitigate the fallout. And amidst all of this, Meghan Markle herself found herself in the eye of a storm, balancing public statements of concern with the private reality of a chaotic, scrutinized production environment. Social media response was immediate. Once reports of the regulatory findings leaked, fans and critics alike flooded platforms with reactions ranging from shock to anger. Memes and commentary pointed out the irony. A show about warmth and charm now defined by negligence and chaos. Hashtags such as #CookingDisaster and #MeghanMistakes began trending in multiple countries, amplifying the story and ensuring it could not be ignored. For a star whose brand relies heavily on perceived authenticity and care, the damage was not just regulatory, it was reputational. What makes this chapter of the story so compelling is not just the regulatory action itself, but the human drama behind it. Crew members describe moments of stress, fear, and moral conflict. Do they enforce safety standards and risk alienating a powerful celebrity star? Or do they compromise their principles to maintain the polished image expected on camera? These tensions played out every day on set, creating a pressure cooker environment that contributed to mistakes and oversights. And while viewers only saw the polished end product, the chaos behind the scenes was real, palpable, and escalating. As we dig deeper, it becomes clear that these regulatory red flags were more than just a snapshot of poor judgment. They were symptoms of a larger issue. They reveal a systemic pattern in which image and ambition were prioritized over safety and responsibility. They illustrate how small oversights, when ignored repeatedly, can grow into crises with far-reaching consequences. And they expose the fragility of trust in celebrity-driven content. One misstep, one ignored warning, and the credibility built over years can be called into question in an instant. And yet, even after all the memos, all the emails, and all the warnings, some insiders claim that not everything the regulators documented was visible to the crew. There are hints of deeper issues, of hidden footage and unreported incidents that could make the situation even more catastrophic than initially understood. Could there have been moments so egregious that even experienced inspectors were shocked? Could some of these incidents have occurred off-camera, never intended for the public eye? The answers remain murky, but the implications are clear. The production's disregard for repeated warnings set the stage for a scandal that would be impossible to contain. By the time Netflix pulled the episodes and issued official statements, the damage was already done. The red flags had gone unheeded for too long. The violations were too widespread, and the public trust had been eroded. For fans, the betrayal was personal. They had tuned in, expecting authenticity and safety, and instead found chaos and negligence. For the regulators, the situation underscored the importance of intervention, proving that even high-profile productions are not immune to accountability. And for Meghan Markle, the incident represented a turning point, a moment in which her brand, her credibility, and her carefully cultivated public persona were suddenly on the line. The story doesn't end with the notices, the cancellations, or the leaked memos. Behind the cameras, there were battles, frustrations, and revelations that would later come to light. Crew members debated reporting additional violations. Executives considered reshooting entire episodes. Social media continued to amplify the scandal. And somewhere in the midst of it all, Meghan Markle was forced to confront a reality that many fans could never have imagined. The image she projected to the world was no longer enough to protect her from the consequences of repeated, ignored warnings. And as we continue, the next chapter will reveal the full scope of the social media firestorm, the public reaction, and the growing pressure on Netflix. The red flags were only the beginning. What happened next would push this story from a behind-the-scenes cautionary tale into a global scandal, one that would affect millions of fans, the streaming giant, and Meghan Markle herself. As soon as the first whispers of the hygiene disaster reached the public, social media erupted like a wildfire racing through a parched forest. What started as scattered observations from attentive viewers quickly escalated into a full-blown storm, with hashtags trending, memes circulating, and fan accounts dissecting every moment of Meghan Markle's Netflix cooking show. For many, it was hard to reconcile the image of the poised, charming host they had admired with the behind-the-scenes chaos being reported. And for some, the betrayal felt personal. They had trusted her guidance, emulated her recipes, and celebrated her on-screen warmth. Now, it seemed that trust had been shattered in the blink of an eye. The firestorm began subtly. A few eagle-eyed viewers noticed small inconsistencies in the episodes. Utensils reused without washing, ingredients left sitting out, brief glimpses of temperature gauges that suggested improper storage. At first, these details were dismissed as coincidences or minor oversights. But then, insiders began leaking information to the press, confirming the suspicions and adding explosive context. Regulators had intervened, citing serious and repeated violations. Fans realized that what they had been laughing off as harmless quirks of television production was, in fact, a potentially dangerous oversight. Memes spread like wildfire across platforms. Illustrations showed Meghan juggling raw meat and vegetables with exaggerated panic. Tweets mocked the "With Love, Meghan" tagline, twisting it to highlight the irony. With love and contamination. Instagram stories and TikTok clips dissected moments from episodes that, in hindsight, revealed the chaos behind the polished facade. The humor was biting, but the underlying outrage was real. Viewers were not only entertained, they were horrified, embarrassed, and incredulous. The social media reaction had multiple layers. Some fans expressed genuine shock, feeling deceived by the discrepancy between Meghan's on-screen persona and the reality behind the scenes. Others were outraged, criticizing not just the mishandling of ingredients but the broader implications of negligence in a show watched by millions. Influencers and food bloggers joined the conversation, some using it to educate their audiences about proper kitchen safety, while others leveraged the controversy to build content that further amplified the scandal. Within hours, the story had crossed national borders, trending in multiple countries and dominating the entertainment news cycle. What made the online reaction so compelling and devastating was the contrast between image and reality. On camera, Meghan had been the perfect host. Smiling, attentive, and relatable. Off camera, the reports painted a picture of chaos, mismanagement, and disregard for safety protocols. This contradiction struck at the heart of public trust. Social media users compared the polished segments of the show with leaked footage, inspection notes, and insider accounts, highlighting the glaring discrepancies. Fans began asking uncomfortable questions. Had this been going on for the entire season? Were previous episodes also compromised? Could they still trust any guidance from Meghan? Some accounts took the scandal even further. Anonymous insiders claimed that entire sequences had been staged or edited to hide the severity of the lapses. Clips allegedly showing proper sanitation were actually filmed after the fact, and original mistakes had been cut out to maintain the illusion of perfection. Whether fully accurate or exaggerated, these claims fueled the narrative of deception, intensifying the backlash and keeping the story trending in online conversations. Celebrities and influencers quickly weighed in, further magnifying the story. Some criticized Meghan directly, pointing to the obvious negligence, while others criticized Netflix for allowing the lapses to occur under its brand. A handful defended her, arguing that mistakes happen in any kitchen and that the regulatory interventions were overblown. But the sheer volume of discussion ensured that the story could not be contained. Every social media platform seemed to have its own angle, its own memes, and its own interpretations, contributing to a sense of chaos that mirrored the production itself. The narrative on social media was not uniform, but one theme dominated: the shock factor. Fans who had once admired Meghan for her poise and charisma now questioned how someone with her platform could allow repeated safety violations to occur. The storytelling on these platforms often exaggerated the stakes, combining humor, outrage, and disbelief to create viral content that spread the scandal to audiences who might never have watched the show. Every retweet, share, and comment amplified the pressure, keeping the story alive in public consciousness and ensuring that Netflix and Meghan could not ignore the fallout. What made this reaction especially significant was the immediacy of social media. Unlike traditional media, which might take hours or days to respond, online communities reacted in real time. Fans live-tweeted episodes, dissected behind-the-scenes leaks, and coordinated discussions that ranged from analysis to ridicule. This instant feedback loop created a sense of urgency and crisis, compelling Netflix to act faster and putting additional pressure on Meghan to respond publicly. Social media didn't just report the story. It actively shaped its trajectory, determining which details were amplified, which angles were pursued, and which narratives dominated public perception. As the scandal grew, the line between accountability and spectacle blurred. Social media users demanded transparency, explanations, and corrective action, while simultaneously turning the situation into entertainment. Viral posts documented every suspected violation, every leaked comment, and every regulatory finding, often accompanied by dramatic captions and commentary that made the story feel larger than life. The result was a self-perpetuating cycle. The more users engaged, the more attention the story received, which in turn created additional content for fans to consume, analyze, and share. Meanwhile, fan communities that had previously celebrated Meghan's charm and relatability were divided. Some remained loyal, defending her and emphasizing her good intentions. Others felt betrayed, seeing the regulatory findings and social media coverage as confirmation that the public persona they admired had been carefully constructed to mask behind-the-scenes chaos. These divisions only added fuel to the fire, creating intense discussions, debates, and, at times, heated arguments online. And yet, despite all the outrage, confusion, and memes, one undeniable truth remained. Social media ensured that this scandal would not fade quietly. It magnified the regulatory findings, broadcast the inconsistencies, and amplified the human drama behind the polished on-screen performance. What might have been a contained production issue transformed into a global spectacle, with millions of fans watching, sharing, and reacting in real time. Every tweet, post, and video clip became part of the narrative, shaping the story in ways that no single regulator, executive, or producer could control. The social media explosion also created unforeseen consequences for Netflix. Advertisers and sponsors became acutely aware of the public perception of the show. Internally, executives scrambled to manage brand image, social media monitoring teams worked around the clock to track trending content, and legal teams reviewed potential liability concerns. Meanwhile, fans continued to dissect episodes and leaked materials, keeping the scandal alive and ensuring that the story remained in public discourse for weeks, if not months. Perhaps the most striking aspect of this digital firestorm was its power to shape perception independent of fact. Clips taken out of context, rumors amplified by influencers, and satirical memes all contributed to a sense of crisis that felt real, even if some details were exaggerated. For viewers, the boundaries between entertainment, news, and personal outrage blurred, creating a viral narrative that could not be easily controlled or contained. And in the midst of this chaos, Meghan Markle remained the central figure, navigating a landscape in which public sentiment, social media commentary, and regulatory findings all collided. Her brand, carefully cultivated over years, was under intense scrutiny. Every public statement, every social media post, and every interview was dissected, critiqued, and amplified. And yet, despite her attempts to maintain poise and control, the story continued to escalate, fueled by the relentless immediacy and global reach of social media. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore how Netflix responded behind closed doors. The social media explosion was only the beginning. The pressure on executives, the scramble to mitigate reputational damage, and the internal debates over accountability, editing, and public messaging would reveal even more about the scope of the crisis. Because if you thought the regulatory red flags were shocking, the digital firestorm that followed would make them seem like just the opening act. Behind the polished veneer of Netflix's boardrooms, the chaos was nothing short of cinematic. By the time the social media storm had reached its peak, executives were waking up to a reality that was both urgent and unprecedented. With Love, Meghan was not just another cooking show. It was a flagship project, heavily marketed, globally anticipated, and starring a celebrity whose brand carried international weight. And now, in the span of a few hours, that brand, and by extension, Netflix's, was under intense scrutiny. Inside Netflix, the scene was tense. Senior executives, PR teams, production managers, and legal advisors convened in emergency meetings. The central question on everyone's mind: how do we contain a scandal that is growing exponentially, visible on every social media platform, and fueled by regulatory intervention? It was a situation they had planned for in theory, but never anticipated in practice. Notes from insiders describe a room charged with urgency, where decisions had to be made immediately, knowing that any delay could amplify public backlash. The first step was assessment. Legal teams combed through every regulatory notice from the FDA and FSIS, identifying specific violations and their potential liabilities. Which episodes were affected? Which scenes could be edited or removed? Were there any instances where misinformation might have been broadcast to viewers? Each question required rapid analysis, and each answer had consequences that could impact the company's reputation, finances, and legal standing. Every detail mattered, and the stakes could not have been higher. At the same time, PR strategists were working on messaging. Netflix needed to communicate accountability without admitting fault in a way that could escalate legal exposure. Carefully worded statements were drafted, revised, and approved, emphasizing concern for safety, commitment to high-quality production, and collaboration with regulators. But the timing of these statements was critical. Say too little, and the public perceives negligence. Say too much, and the company opens itself to lawsuits or further scrutiny. It was a delicate balance, and one that had to be executed perfectly under immense pressure. Production teams were equally stressed. Episodes that had been carefully filmed, edited, and polished were suddenly in limbo. Should they be re-edited to remove questionable sequences? Should additional safety disclaimers be added? Should entire segments be res-hot with stricter oversight? Each option came with significant costs, delays, and logistical complications. And the longer the show remained suspended, the more the social media firestorm intensified, creating a vicious feedback loop. Compounding the pressure was Meghan Markle herself. As the star and central figure of the show, her actions, public statements, and social media posts had immediate consequences for Netflix. According to insiders, her team was in constant communication with executives, coordinating messaging, rehearsing statements, and attempting to manage public perception. It was a delicate dance. Balance accountability with brand preservation, acknowledge mistakes without appearing negligent, and maintain the trust of millions of viewers, all while under unprecedented scrutiny. One particularly tense moment, insiders revealed, occurred when leaked internal memos and inspection footage made their way online. Suddenly, the narrative was no longer controlled by Netflix or Meghan. It was being shaped by fans, critics, and viral social media content. Executives had to act quickly to mitigate damage. Embargoes were issued to media outlets. Temporary takedowns were arranged for online clips, and internal communications emphasized the need for discretion and rapid response. Every second mattered, because in today's digital landscape, a delayed reaction can escalate a crisis exponentially. Legal considerations loomed large. Beyond immediate compliance with FDA and FSIS mandates, Netflix faced potential liability if viewers were harmed by recipes or practices portrayed in the show. Attorneys analyzed each segment, identifying where disclaimers could have prevented liability and assessing the likelihood of lawsuits, class action claims, or regulatory penalties. Every detail, from how ingredients were labeled on screen to how certain cooking practices were demonstrated, was scrutinized for potential exposure. The pressure to act quickly was immense, and decisions had to be made in hours, not days. Meanwhile, the social media firestorm continued to escalate. Memes, commentary, and speculation spread across platforms with breathtaking speed. Each post added pressure, demanding responses from both Netflix and Meghan's team. In some ways, the public reaction dictated the network's decisions. Editing episodes, issuing statements, and rescheduling releases became part of a frantic effort to regain control of a narrative that had slipped entirely out of their hands. Insiders describe long nights of monitoring trends, analyzing sentiment, and adjusting strategies hour by hour, trying to stay ahead of a public that was increasingly unforgiving. One particularly challenging issue was maintaining internal morale. Crew members, already exhausted by the grueling filming schedule, now faced additional scrutiny and pressure. Some were blamed for lapses that may have been beyond their control. Others were forced to work overtime to reshoot or edit scenes in compliance with new safety standards. According to insiders, tensions were high, with heated debates over accountability, responsibility, and the handling of the crisis. These internal conflicts added another layer of complexity, making it difficult to execute decisions swiftly and effectively. Amidst this turmoil, executives faced a critical decision. Should they attempt to salvage the show, or cut losses and pull it entirely? Each option carried risks. Salvaging the show required additional production, edits, and strict oversight, potentially delaying release by months and costing millions. Pulling it entirely risked alienating fans, disappointing subscribers, and damaging the relationship with Meghan Markle's team. Either choice had high stakes, and the pressure to get it right was unrelenting. In the background, the regulators were still in play. FDA and FSIS officials continued to communicate with Netflix, emphasizing compliance, documentation, and corrective action. Their involvement was both a warning and a mandate. The network could not simply ignore the violations or rely solely on public relations to smooth over the issue. Real action was required, changes in protocols, audits, and oversight. It was a stark reminder that the consequences of ignoring warnings were not theoretical. They were real, documented, and enforceable. And as Netflix scrambled to respond, the public spectacle only intensified. Fans dissected every decision, scrutinizing statements, sharing insider leaks, and predicting potential outcomes. Analysts debated the future of Meghan's brand, the credibility of the network, and the likelihood of a successful recovery. Every move by Netflix or Meghan's team was amplified, critiqued, and debated in real time, creating a pressure cooker environment in which decisions carried immediate, far-reaching consequences. By the end of the week, Netflix had implemented several crisis measures, temporarily suspending episodes, reviewing all footage for compliance, drafting public statements, and increasing oversight of all production teams. But despite these efforts, the damage had already been done. Public trust was shaken, the social media narrative was relentless, and the regulatory scrutiny remained intense. For executives and Meghan's team alike, the situation was far from resolved. Every decision carried weight, and every misstep could exacerbate the crisis. And in the midst of this chaos, one reality became painfully clear. This was not just a production problem. It was a public relations disaster, a brand crisis, and a cautionary tale rolled into one. Netflix had learned firsthand how quickly a high-profile project could spiral out of control, how regulatory warnings could trigger a media firestorm, and how social media could amplify even minor mistakes into global spectacle. The lessons were harsh, immediate, and unforgettable. As we move into the next chapter, we'll explore the personal fallout for Meghan Markle herself. How did the star at the center of the storm navigate scrutiny, criticism, and the weight of public disappointment? How did she respond to mounting pressure from fans, regulators, and executives alike? And perhaps most intriguingly, what was happening behind the scenes as she attempted to reclaim her image and control the narrative before it completely unraveled? The moment the scandal broke publicly, all eyes turned to Meghan Markle. As the star and face of With Love, Meghan, she became the focal point of criticism, praise, memes, and endless speculation. Fans, critics, and journalists alike demanded a response. Some wanted a heartfelt apology. Others wanted an explanation, an acknowledgement of mistakes, and reassurance that no one had been harmed. And yet, the very public nature of the scandal created an almost impossible balancing act. Meghan had to appear accountable without undermining her brand, calm the public without admitting catastrophic negligence, and maintain credibility in a situation that was spiraling far beyond her control. Her first move was a carefully scripted public statement. Released via her social media platforms and coordinated with Netflix's PR team, it was crafted to convey concern, responsibility, and transparency. She acknowledged the regulatory findings, expressed regret that lapses had occurred, and reassured viewers that she was committed to learning and improvement. On the surface, it appeared measured, poised, and professional. But for many observers, the tone felt rehearsed, calculated, and, at times, detached from the gravity of the violations documented by FDA and FSIS inspectors. The public reaction was immediate and polarized. Loyal fans praised her for acknowledging mistakes and taking responsibility. Others accused her of trying to minimize the seriousness of the situation, pointing out that words alone could not undo repeated hygiene failures in a kitchen that millions of viewers were attempting to replicate at home. Social media became a battlefield. Hashtags both supporting and criticizing Meghan trended, while viral clips dissected every word, facial expression, and hand gesture in her statements. The scrutiny was relentless, leaving no room for error. Behind the scenes, Meghan's team was working around the clock to manage the fallout. She conducted private calls with Netflix executives, PR strategists, and legal advisors to coordinate responses to emerging leaks, social media commentary, and news coverage. Every interview, post, or media appearance had to be carefully planned, timed, and approved. Even small deviations from the approved script could result in further backlash. Insiders describe a high-pressure environment in which every action was monitored, analyzed, and critiqued in real time. One of the first major public appearances came in the form of a live interview with a well-known media outlet. Meghan sat across from the host, poised, articulate, and composed. She repeated key talking points, acknowledging the oversight, emphasizing learning and improvement, and highlighting Netflix's commitment to safety and quality. But beneath the surface, there were moments of tension. Viewers noticed subtle hesitations, shifts in tone, and glimpses of frustration, small cracks in an otherwise polished persona. Analysts and social media users dissected the interview frame by frame, interpreting each nuance as either honesty, defensiveness, or strategic calculation. Simultaneously, Meghan leveraged her social media platforms to communicate directly with fans. Instagram posts and stories highlighted behind-the-scenes efforts to improve hygiene, while TikTok clips showcased newly implemented protocols, from sanitized utensils to proper storage practices. These posts aimed to humanize her response, framing the scandal not as a catastrophic failure, but as an opportunity for growth and transparency. However, the effort had mixed results. While some fans appreciated the direct engagement, others criticized it as performative, arguing that staged videos could not undo the real risks exposed by regulators. In addition to public-facing efforts, Meghan also initiated internal measures aimed at restoring trust behind the scenes. Reports suggest that she personally oversaw a comprehensive review of production practices, ensuring that every episode met or exceeded FDA and FSIS standards. She implemented new training protocols for crew members, increased oversight of food handling, and mandated stricter compliance documentation. The goal was clear: demonstrate accountability, prevent future violations, and protect both the show and her personal brand from further damage. Yet, despite these proactive steps, criticism persisted. Commentators questioned why lapses had occurred in the first place, highlighting systemic issues and repeated warnings that had been ignored. Some argued that Meghan, as the show's central figure, bore ultimate responsibility, regardless of crew oversight. Others suggested that the combination of celebrity pressure and production schedules created an environment in which lapses were almost inevitable. The debate raged across platforms, drawing in food bloggers, regulators, journalists, and casual viewers alike. To complicate matters further, leaks from insiders continued to emerge. Footage, memos, and emails suggested that certain hygiene lapses had been more severe than publicly disclosed. These leaks undermined the narrative of swift corrective action and transparency, casting doubt on Meghan's public statements. Each new revelation prompted fresh waves of discussion, criticism, and media coverage, forcing her team to respond quickly, craft new messaging, and recalibrate their strategy. Amid the criticism, Meghan also sought allies. Friends, collaborators, and fellow celebrities publicly voiced support, emphasizing her intentions, efforts to learn, and commitment to safety. These endorsements provided some relief, but they were far from sufficient to quell the broader controversy. In fact, for some observers, celebrity support only amplified the sense of spectacle, creating a perception that public relations and optics were being prioritized over genuine accountability. Perhaps the most telling aspect of Meghan's response was the careful balance between contrition and brand preservation. Every statement was meticulously crafted to convey responsibility while maintaining her image as a competent, caring, and relatable figure. She acknowledged mistakes, but avoided language that suggested recklessness or negligence. She emphasized learning and improvement, but carefully framed the narrative to highlight her role as a responsible leader committed to excellence. In a sense, her response was a masterclass in crisis management, but it was also under constant scrutiny, with every nuance dissected and debated in real time. And yet, despite her efforts, the situation was far from resolved. Social media continued to amplify both criticism and support. Regulators maintained oversight. Netflix wrestled with production, compliance, and brand protection, and the public remained captive.